Okay, and it didn't play the intro. Welcome to the ladies' room, everyone. Hi, friends. I don't know what happened to the intro video, but I guess YouTube or StreamYard or both was like, fuck your video. So, welcome everybody. I'm Allison, the Mighty Librarian.
Vagabondia, also a librarian, but not mighty.
Oh, you're just as mighty, if not mightier. You're probably the mightier. That's who you are, the mightier librarian. But yeah,
Nowhere near.
welcome. Yeah. So today we're going to be talking about losing our minds, and although we do mean we're going to be going crazy, we mean the brain drain that is beginning to bestow us. Why it matters to you, why it matters to your kitchen table, and why it matters in a more broader global, United States in the global context as well. Because you might say of all the problems we have right now, education is probably like low on the totem pole. In a lot of ways, maybe you're right. Maybe that is true, but um, we didn't get to be where innovation happens, or used to be where innovation happens, from not having the greatest minds either born and raised here or through immigration, and we get them here. you know I just thought of this, like, as we were going on the show, after World War II, thankfully, the reason why Germany never didn't get to the atom bomb before we did was because they said, that type of physics, it's escaping me now. What's the nuclear bomb physics? um
Atomic?
yeah, but it's like, there's a broader, like, well, either way, that type of physics and math was JEW math, according to Hitler. That was one reason. Second reason was because a lot of their brilliant minds, like Einstein, came over to the US and alerted President Roosevelt, hey, they're trying to make this happen. It's theoretically possible, and I'm going to help you get there. And so, a lot of our great minds that made the atom bomb were from refugees from Europe. But then after World War II, how did we get to space? Operation Paperclip, which took all the brilliant Nazi scientists and brought them over here to help us get into space and space-like things. So, um, it's not like, it's really national. It's, as an American, I want to say, I have that. I think anybody for that's in their own country has a level of patriotism in a way, but at least we knew that, hey, there's some smart people that we could learn some stuff from, and regardless of how controversial it was, because it didn't come without some controversy, bringing those people over. So now we're looking at a brain drain. Scientists who um, was gonna be coming over. I think he was from France to science conference. He was deported for stupid reasons. There are doctors who went to their home in the Middle East who tried to come back, who weren't citizens but were permanent residences and had no reason to be able to come back. Um, were deported back to country in the Middle East. So we're already starting to lose scientists. And, at the little, it's not a little, I would say it's a medium to small to medium sized public university we spent years trying to get a robotics degree program at our university. Years. I'm talking well before COVID. This was in the works. It's not easy to start that kind of program because you need specialized professors who know math and a lot of stuff that most people don't know. And so a lot of our robotics professors are immigrants. A good chunk of our faculty are immigrants from all over the world, concentrated really from India and that area, South Korea. We have a lot of professors from South Korea. Then we have someone from Germany. Like we're a pretty small university. But going back to the robotics team, most of them are from somewhere in the Middle East. And out of six professors, four of them have Mohammed in their name in some way, shape, or form. So you can guess where they're from, and you can guess that they're probably, if they left, they probably wouldn't be able to get back. And word on the street is a whole bunch of our faculty are leaving. And I don't blame them. But why does this matter to anybody else? Well, you know, if you really did some math, you could figure out where I live, but I'm not going to make it easy for anybody. But we're the only university within 100-mile radius, 200-mile radius, I think it is, that offers some sort of robotics program in that STEM field. Now, who do we service at our university? A whole conglomerate of students. We service the military. We service first gen students. We service continuing ed. You never started or started your degree and now you're 43, kids are grown, or they're at an age where you can go back to school and finish. We have a lot of those. We have a lot of online students. We have a lot of different. So I think one of our biggest student population is non-traditional in some way, shape, or form. So what this means is that if you're in an area, if you just drive 20 minutes north, you're in some impoverished area in the next county. And what if you have a kid that's really, really smart? Well, you could send them to our university. Um, Chances are, if they're really smart, they're going to get the Georgia Hope Scholarship, which basically pays, I think, most of your college tuition if you attended public Georgia school and you have a GPA of like 3.5 and above. So if you're a, just a try hard in high school, you can probably get most of your tuition paid. Forget like if federal funding isn't there, you can get there's a lot of scholarships within Georgia that can help somebody get pretty much a free ride to a Georgia school. Not all of them, but a lot of them. Um, so we're affordable, we're local. You wouldn't have to pay for room and board. You could commute to and from the school. So it gets somebody who typically couldn't afford a robotics, bachelor's degree, which would open them up to all sorts of other studies and jobs. And even if he stayed in Georgia, there's so many STEM places he could work at afterwards, or places that require a STEM degree like robotics. But if that, it's likely that that program's gonna be gone. Now that same student, he likely doesn't have the opportunity unless he is able to raise the money to get room and board to go somewhere else that he can't commute to. So does it affect every? And I know we're not the only university. There are lots of medium to small universities that provide these degree programs for kids to get good paying jobs, to get out of the poverty. And it is really a shame that you know these immigrants weren't taking American jobs. There weren't any Americans to fill the jobs. If there were, it wouldn't have been so impossible to start this degree program. So anyway, Vagabondia, what do you have to say?
No, you're making really good points because the brain drain we're experiencing is not only are we losing the professors and the innovators and so forth, but we're also losing the international students that would have come in who now, I mean, they really should really double think that because of the danger they could potentially be under and the exposure that that would give our children to these really great minds and different experiences and so forth. That's completely gone. And as you pointed out, for many of our rural and small communities, there are very few local opportunities to really explore technical fields and so forth. And having that right there in their backyard is a huge bonus. But with that being removed because these professors are leaving, they're now going to have to consider a school where it's going to be further away. Good chance it's going to be more expensive. They're going to have to pay room and board. They're really going to have to consider if that's worth going into or not. Plus, a lot of people are worried about universities in general because of the retaliation against protesters, the attacks on different programs, and so forth. I'm sure there's a lot of students right now who are considering whether they want to wait and just take a couple of gap years before they go into higher education, or if they'll go into higher education at all, because of the instability going on at the moment. And their schools losing funding. So, like, if you were really interested in oceanography or something, the research funds that were attached to that, if they had climate change in them, may be gone now. And a lot of the medical
Mm-hmm.
research as well. So you may have been really promising in that field, incredibly talented, had great opportunities ahead of you. And because of these decisions being made, the funding that would have made that possible is just jerked right out from under you. And the people you could have learned from potentially could also be either self censoring or choosing to go elsewhere. In addition to the international um, professors who are leaving, there are a lot of homegrown American professors who are like, no, I'm not doing this. And they're choosing to go to Canada or to another country where they can teach openly. And we've always imported the best and the brightest. What happens when not only are we not importing them, but we are exporting our best and the brightest as well?
And that's where, and the brain drain does, happens on a lot of different levels. We've already been seeing it in K-12 because I don't blame them. Who the hell wants to get paid what you get paid to deal with the kind of bullshit you got to deal with? So you have that level of brain drain. So students to begin with aren't being prepared for college because K-12 is the math in a lot of states. Not every state. There are some states that are still holding the fort, but the university level uh, is really where I think we see the the biggest, and it's not even just teaching. It's like you said, the research, because the grant money is going to drive. Sorry, my dogs are. There's a squirrel. So you just gotta wait for that squirrel to go back to it. I don't know if you can hear him. So it's not even just the teaching; it's the research elements to it. Like even if you go to like a lot of people don't realize, and I don't know all the ins and outs of this of what I'm about to say because I'm not in the medical field, but I know how it generally works. And I would love to get somebody on here in the sciencey areas on how this really messes with our innovation in STEM and uh, emerging fields that are going to be coming up. Because um, if there's no, a lot of times somebody, most often in medical and science fields, they teach at a university because the university is where the grant money is to fund research. If you're interested in researching, like, hey, I have an idea and I think it'll fix, treat, do X, Y, and Z, you have two options. You go to a university. Sometimes you can go into like CDC, NIH type laboratories that are working on these projects. Sometimes there's those options, but your other option is besides a university is the private sector. And a lot of times in the private sector, they want a specific result. They don't actually give a fuck if they just want you to say something works, regardless of it if it does or not. Hence why you have so many class action lawsuits. I had Vivek was. I'm surprised there hasn't been a class action. Maybe there's one in the works, but he bought the rights to an Alzheimer's drug that I think it had 3 studies behind it that said it just doesn't work. He bought it and repackaged it and then tried to market it and made billions before he dumped it. Like so, it's easy to get research to say what you want to say if you're determined enough. So anyway, the academic side is often a lot more trustworthy because it has the credibility of people, the institution, um, and the if you have a $5 million government grant to study something, chances are it's important. Like money does talk, and not just in greedy ways. It kind of somebody's the government was willing to spend $5 million on vaccines, and I'm sure they spent much more on something.
Well, and think
You
also about all
know,
the grad students and undergrad students they have to help them work on that research while they're there, and often free or very low cost labor that in the
for
private sector that
tuition.
would not be an option.
Mm-mm,
Godfrey makes a really good
no.
point that the foreign students pay more tuition, and that really helps fund the school. That can make a big difference.
That's a good part you make in academia. You can often get a GA or a PhD. I forgot what the PhD like assistant is, but you can get your tuition paid for working on something. So there's a lot of those opportunities will dry up as medicine is all of a sudden woke, and you know um, other countries are gobbling up our scientists already. France and Canada are both taking a whole bunch of. Tom Snyder is moving to Canada, and you know
Yeah,
he's
there's
more of a
what
famous.
three history and political science professors that are going to Canada, and their specialty was authoritarianism. Um, that's pretty alarming.
Yeah, it panicked me a bit, but then I listened to Bulwark take, and I kind of get it, but I also at the same time I'm very concerned. It's like, thanks guys. Um, you know, in authoritarianism, and when they go after quote unquote the elites. Now, elite is can be really broadly defined depending on how you want to define it. Uh, but somebody like Tom Snyder, no, I'm sorry, Tim Snyder, he would be, he's probably well off, I would guess, because he has a lot of successful books and he's very well known. But like, he's also not like Elon, his wealth in the aspect of historical research and wealth in tech is like two different. Um, I was trying to find that link you sent me. Um, that was that Substack article about Tom Snyder and friends leaving. I can't, of course, I'll find it like immediately when I get off. But anyway, so on the Bulwark, they had a good point that they're really like in the order of operations of authoritarianism. They're not likely to go like it takes time for the government to get to people like us. But if they're really wanting to start an authoritarian crackdown, yeah, I guess you go after those folks who talk about authoritarianism, who are critical of Trump. And her point was that we've already ceded a lot of ground by obeying in advance. That it's really going to take all of us, us meaning the public, the people that are just trying to live their lives to do something. And if we don't, the more and more we don't fight back in a collective something, it's looking grim, and that's kind of scary, because we did like somebody like me, I don't have a vast audience, I don't have a big platform of any sorts. Yeah, I probably reach, a few hundred people a week, but like, the people that have the millions and millions of followers platforms, you know, and I'm not just talking about in necessarily YouTube land, like they really need to start doing something. And I get wanting to flee, I do.
Well, and that's part of the problem. A lot of the people that have a voice, even Hollywood types, they do have power in their platform, um, and they're using their means to leave the country instead of staying and standing up. Which I understand the risk they're taking by choosing to stay, but also the rest of us don't have the means or not the same platform that they have, and for them to use it would be very powerful for us. But I get it. I
Yeah,
mean, I'm
and it's
sure they're thinking McCarthyism and worrying about being blacklisted and everything else. Um, One of the things Cynthia mentioned that her college buddy is a retired pediatric heart surgeon, and has been teaching and doing research, and is afraid his grant money is going to disappear. Um, and that's a big concern. And like the funding cuts that they've done at the NIH and the CDC and all these other places, and there's these key words that if they show up in your research can get your research defunded, but they have absolutely nothing to do with the quote unquote woke ideology they're trying to combat. But like if you even say female, like can you imagine doing a medical study and not mentioning the sex or gender of the patient? It's not possible. But if their keyword search finds it, then suddenly, you're not being funded, and it could be something as important as well, like they've defunded a bunch of the long COVID studies and the effects on long COVID. If there is a sex differential factor in how it's affecting people, that research is
mm,
important for how you treat it going forward. But because of these arbitrary search terms, that
stupid.
could be eliminated. And now some people are just going to suffer and die. Thanks, bro.
Yeah, and that's not just, like there's some things that affect just men and some things that affect just women. Like I don't think these people understand like, you know, sometimes gender has to be a thing.
Right. How do you not say female when you're talking about uterine cancer? How do you not say male when you're talking about prostate cancer?
Yeah, right. And so it seems so, I know they're not like looking for anything. There is no, and there is no logic behind a lot of their decisions. That's just, if there's no logic behind their decisions, a lot of times there's another agenda at play, obviously. But for example, like, they're cutting comment cards, not literal comment cards, but feedback for Social Security Administration, because to be cost effective. They're cutting people who answer the phones. They're trying, and it makes no sense, right? How is that efficient? It's not. They're trying to create a bad experience so that you don't want to deal with Social Security. They're putting right wingers on to say if you complain about not getting your check, it's the thieves and the fraudsters that complain the most. It's you know, or my grandmother wouldn't complain. A billionaire saying his 94-year-old mother wouldn't complain if her check. First of all, you can't. You're a billionaire. Come on now.
Well, and cutting the phone service really makes no sense because a lot of, particularly some of our most elderly Social Security recipients, they're reliant on phone service. They may not have access to internet, they may not be comfortable with the technology. They're used to using the phone to connect to the service they need, and having to go through this automated phone line is hard enough, but you remove that and it's even worse. And you're right, like his millionaire grandmother, she doesn't need Social Security to survive. That's not her only income. But for a lot of our people, it is. And missing one check is absolute devastation.
and they're making it so you have to verify who you are in person, making it hard for grandma who can't drive anymore. Like, and some of these offices now that they've closed some of the more satellite offices for rural areas, like grandma can't just drive or pay a cab or, you know, like it is it is really devastating. And part of me, Elon's coming out with some really. There's so much to talk about. Elon's, always been really big on eugenics. Like he's really starting to cut into like that agenda now. By they're getting
Oh,
rid
he's
of
starting to say the quiet part out loud. Absolutely.
yeah, and so they're getting rid of accessibility in schools. So if you're disabled, like there's no more sign language interpreters, which I don't understand why that. Like, not all people are born deaf. sometimes there's an accident and you lose your hearing. Like just like forget on how fucked up it is in general. Like
Or
let's
you
just
catch the
talk about
measles and it affects your hearing.
exactly like not everything, am I disabled now because I can't see perfectly? Like when are you going to draw the line at accessibility? So um yeah, so I think a lot of this they really want to get rid of the elderly. I have no doubt that a lot of this is to make people
Well,
die.
remember during COVID when they were saying that the elderly would gladly sacrifice themselves? Like, what the fuck? How do you, don't
And
volunteer
they
for
had to have
them.
paid them. They had to have paid them. Like who honestly, these people are so selfish. You think my father-in-law is a diehard, he's 80 years old ish. There's no way he's ever going to sacrifice himself, and he's a diehard, true believer. So like I don't believe it. I
Well, and
don't believe
plus, why do
like
we don't need anybody to sacrifice themselves. During COVID, it was like just wear a damn mask. That's all I'm asking you to do. Stay home if you can and wear a mask if you have to go out so that your 80-year-old grandmother doesn't have to die. She doesn't need to be sacrificed for the cause, people. It's that simple.
you want to hear a COVID story? Okay, so I me and religion are having a tough time together right now. I mean that's a whole other story. But I used to be really engaged in my church, and while COVID was going on, we had a skeleton crew, and we would stream service every Sunday. And I was there every Sunday until I myself got COVID. Okay, but the same people that were minimizing COVID were the same people who, like my pastor, he didn't like turn away people at the door. He just we had social distancing seating, but our a good chunk of the church was very elderly. So, or there was one guy who just had a liver transplant, one guy who had esophageal cancer. You know, so like we had a lot of people with a lot of issues who just weren't going to come, even regardless of COVID. So anyway, so me, it was most days it was me and the skeleton crew and a handful of people, and a handful was a good day. So the same people saying COVID wasn't a big deal, or the same people who were totally fine with me showing up there to risk my life, but they weren't going to come in. So it's like wild to me, how brazen and that. So that's a whole other rant, but yeah. So we're back to the circling back around. Um, yeah, we're definitely going to be having a brain drain, and I'm not going to lie to you. I'm looking at overseas jobs too. You know, um, I'm just, like if I have the opportunity, I don't think I would turn it down at the moment.
Well, and so many fields
So
are being impacted. I mean, um, the medical professionals who are leaving certain states or rural areas because of laws and restrictions that are there, which is making their even less access to medical care in those regions, and any teaching jobs like the a number of teachers who are going to retire early or leave because of the chaos going on with the Department of Education and everything else. It's going to impact everyone who doesn't send their child to a private school, obviously. There's just there's too many factors at play, and it's affecting too many fields.
yeah, and yeah. I mean, I don't think it definitely wouldn't be easier for me to just be, like Tim Snyder. Everyone knows him. I mean, not everyone. Let me rephrase. Most history departments know who he is. So he would have no problem getting a job anywhere, whether it's Canada or any country in Europe. You know, like, so average Joe, American professor, it might, you know, it might be that, it's teach from, Dear Leaders Manual or don't teach at all. So,
Well, we also
And I
have
don't like this
a
anxiety.
workforce that's now being inundated with a lot of federal workers who either took the buyout or who have been fired. They have years of experience and skills and everything else that they're bringing into the private sector, which takes anybody new to the field um, out of play for applying for a job, but also all those university
Point.
positions and so forth. um, a lot of those public servants could transfer their skills into universities potentially and so forth. But are they going to
Right.
want to if they're at risk of this kind of censorship or attacks? Cynthia, I saw
Um,
that. So Trump's supposed to be announcing more tariffs, and he made a statement. He told the U.S. automakers not to raise their prices due to the tariffs, and then he said he doesn't care if car prices go up.
um, oops, I didn't mean to do that early. I wanted to show y'all. Speaking of tariffs, I gotta show you this. So, um, I just happened to look up. I'm at a red light waiting to turn. I look up at the perfect time, and I see this billboard ad, and it's the kind of billboard that um, it's like a digital billboard, so it's cycling a lot of different ads about a lot of different things. And it's a pretty busy intersection, so this is like prime real estate. This billboard is prime real estate. Now, I'm sure there's I don't know how you pay for this, like, but some ads circulate more than others. So when I saw this ad, I couldn't get my phone out in time to take a picture. So I whipped around, driving once, and I couldn't get it before the light turned red. So my daughter's like, "Why don't you just pull over in the parking lot?" And I'm like, "Oh, smartass." Excuse me. So anyway, I'm gonna show you the ad that is doo doo doo. Won't let me put the so if you can't, and I'm actually good at thinking about going back to the intersection to get a better picture. And so if you're not looking at it, it says tariffs are attacks at the gas pump, right? And this is right above a gas station. Um, and what's not legible is in the picture is paid for by the government of Canada, and then it has the Canadian like logo, government logo. So, um, you know, Canada, Canada is trying to influence us, um, and I thank them. So, any help we can get from our friends. So, I have to wonder, like I don't know how you buy billboard advertisement at all. So I have to assume that maybe it's like one company owns a bunch of billboards in a bunch of states, and maybe it just we're part of that package that they bought to. But I want I want to know more about this, and so I'm gonna um, probably won't get to it tonight, but tomorrow I'm definitely gonna look into their advertising in the U.S. to see what other stuff is going on. Because I was just
Tiki says,
I laughed so hard.
right? Tiki says there's several versions around, and I'd heard that there were a bunch closer to the Canadian border in Michigan and Minnesota and stuff like that.
See, that makes sense to me. Like I don't, I don't. I think they're just trying to wake us up, and I'm sure we're just like my city is part of a bigger, companies area, so Canada, well, area. Um, so yeah, no, Cynthia, billboards aren't cheap. Because I did a library democracy story when Greg Abbott was buying billboards in other countries, along one of the known country routes of how migrants get here, saying don't come here. And so I was looking into how much that would cost because he was saying it was only $100,000. I'm like, bullshit. There's no way that only costs $100,000. So I asked Chat GPT, and I did some of my own original research. Chat GPT estimates a $1 to $5 million price range depending on what type of, because there's just stationary, there's digital that that circulate, the size of the billboard. If you have to print, then you know paste it, those old fashioned kinds. So I estimated anywhere between around the six, like $2 to $7 million. Um, but either way, it's not 100,000. That campaign, I don't know if he actually went through with it, but it was going to cost millions. There's no way that if you're going to put that many billboards up, like it's going to cost like $100,000. Refuse to believe that.
I was going to tell you, our adopted granddaughter went to the doctor. She had like a strep or something, and it's my local doctor's office as well. And they have these decals on the walls in the patient rooms to make them more comfortable. And it's like there's a couple of lions in one of them. There's some birds in another. There's fish in another. Just whatever. When they went, when she was getting tested for strep, they were all gone, and she was kind of freaked out because they've always been there. And so they asked about it. They were told that they had to remove them to comply with the DEI, anti DEI stuff. So apparently, a vinyl lion on a wall in a exam room is too DEI and too woke for some
Lion.
companies. Yeah,
It's a lion.
yeah. They told them their
Like,
walls had to be. Yeah, basically, I don't know what's so woke about a lion, but okay. Um, I know one of them was different colored fish. Maybe that was the problem, but that is how fish appear in nature. So I don't know what to tell you. But like, really, now maybe I suspect that this is owned by a larger hospital company, that they're going like to the extreme to avoid being targeted. But they basically told them to remove everything from their walls. So, but now you're in like, yeah. So the reason they're there is to make a child feel more comfortable being in an exam room. And now they've got to stare at blank walls. How's that helping? I can't imagine anyone complained about the vinyl lion. I just feel sure that that did not occur.
or maybe it wouldn't shock me if somebody actually did complain about, because lions are gender, like lions with the big mane are male, and then
That's
lions
true.
without the
One of them
mane.
did have a mane and one did not have a mane. So that's probably what happened.
You know, like you can also tell the difference between male and female tigers. Those are a little harder, but you know, that's just that's wild.
Well, and I thought I wondered about it, but she sent me the video and like there's nothing on the walls. And I'm like, that is so weird.
Yeah, that is wild. And you know what? I think you should, not you personally, but if you're seeing this, like use any reason to contact your rep. Like this is, children now can't be comforted in a doctor's office because you're worried they're gonna get some ideas about a lion in a freaking like.
Right. Well,
Yeah,
and I
that's
know
true,
that her
Cynthia.
mom, yep. Her mom did say something to the nurse, and the nurse said it's the most ridiculous thing she's seen in 17 years of nursing or whatever. And she knows someone at the larger hospital and spoke to them, and they said, yeah, it's true. They told us to remove everything.
Let's make it.
And this is the concern because the fear of retaliation is making people self censor. So before they're being told they have to remove it, they're doing it to avoid confrontation, which, I mean, that's compliance before the fact.
Yeah, and that's what something doesn't happen. Like I don't know how we get through this. And I don't want to be all doom and gloom, but it's we all have to do something because no one's coming to save us, and they're all worried about lions on the kids' doctors' walls. I mean,
Well,
I
and
mean we're
I I really hope they don't walk into a library because our children's departments are filled with pictures of animals and pictures of all kinds of things because children respond to visual images, particularly colorful ones, and they really like natural images, and we use them a lot. And I don't, last thing I need is a parent to go all bonkers saying that we're trying to give some woke agenda because we showed a family of lions, but I'm sorry. It was there before and nothing happened. It's fine.
family like That's just like bonkers. Because he, I, you know,
I was going to
I
ask
all
you.
I know. Oh,
No, I'm
what's
sorry.
up?
There's a teacher in, of course, Idaho that got in trouble because she had a sign in her room that was the different colored hands, and it said "All are welcome here." And her administration told her she had to take it down. It was too divisive. And at first, she took it down because she was like, I don't want to cause problems. And then the more she thought about it, she was like, oh hell nah. So she put it back up, and they told her she had to have it down by the end of the year. And she's like, no, 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 no. This is it. This is my line in the sand. Everyone is welcome here. There's nothing divisive about that. Everyone is welcome here. And I saw that a school in, I almost want to say it was Houston because it surprised me, but the administrator and all the teachers showed up one day in the shirt that says all are welcome here. And I'm like, now that's how you do it. Counter it with that.
I'm very grateful for our school district. They're really putting up a. I wouldn't say they're putting up a fight, but they've indicated that they're going to put up a fight. They're going to, because they're looking to cut special ed. Part of the eugenics thing. Want to do special education. Um,
Yeah, they're cutting the training.
do,
Yeah.
and I'm just like, oh my fucking god! Like,
Yeah, it's insane.
so
um, Cynthia mentioned the Trump signed an executive order, I believe on Thursday, it might have been Friday, about the National Zoo and the Smithsonian, that they have to, it's restoring truth and sanity in American history. The title alone tells you where this is going. So basically, the the national parks, the Smithsonian, the National Zoo, all these things, they have to go through and make sure that there are no signs, monuments, anything else that are have woke ideology in them. And
they're
they're supposed to make
animals.
sure that they are, yeah, they cannot. So I
Oh,
didn't know
climate change. Right? They're
yeah,
probably.
that's part of it, yeah. So one of them was that the national parks were supposed to go through and make sure that no monuments or signs had been altered or removed since January 2020 in response to Black Lives Matter, I believe. And it had to do with a lot of the Confederate statues that came down. But none of those were at national parks. Those were all in municipalities. That's private land. That has nothing to do with the national parks. And one of the National Park Service people was like, that literally, that does not exist. That's not a thing. Um, but they made them take transgender off the Stonewall monument and various things like that. So I didn't know this, but the Smithsonian several years ago had a display about the Enola Gay, and one of the things they talked about was the impact on the citizens of. Well, no,
I
no,
know.
this doesn't have to do with that. Surprisingly, this has to do with they were part of what they talked about was the impact on the Japanese citizens hit by the bomb, and people threw a
Oh,
fit. How dare you show that the bomb we dropped hurt people? Well, but it did, and they had to scale back the exhibit so it was only focused on basically the mechanics of the plane and the bomb and not on what actually the impact of the bomb was. And that was a few years ago, and now that's going to go even harder. And again, they're going to self-censor beforehand, but at the same time we have a women's history museum, there's an African American history museum, there's an art museum that's Asian Pacific. Like, they're not, how do you portray African American history or women's history or Asian Pacific history and it not allude to injustice? It's a part of the experience. And art in particular is going to reflect that. So now you're going to have to be like, what? Like, come on.
do they really like? I was just thinking of. I don't know. Um, I don't know why this popped into my head, but like, um, you go to MoMA, Museum of Modern Art in New York City, and I'm gonna say it. I'm gonna say this horrifically. It's French, so I don't speak French, but Demoiselles d'Avignon. And it's basically Picasso's. It's a huge wall mural. You don't realize how huge it is. Actually, see the original. But it's basically prostitutes of Avignon. So, like, is that going to be indecency? Or, like, you know, the Enola Gay? I mean, they took that off the, was it the Navy or Air Force
The,
website for the word gay? you
mm-hmm,
know, like,
right.
what are we supposed to say about it? We dropped an atomic bomb. It was fine. The end. Like,
Yeah. Yeah, we can't talk about what
like, are we,
happened when the bomb hit.
like, what did it do? It killed hundreds of thousands of people eventually.
Yeah, killed,
You know,
maimed,
like, what do
and
you,
has lingering health consequences for generations. But let's not talk about that.
so it's just,
Well, and this, so you and I have talked about this
wow.
before, right? So, like, I was a nerd, I was an honor student, took all the honors classes, thought I was well versed in history. I get to college and I find out about Japanese internment, did not know it existed. Boy, was I pissed.
Oh, really?
Wholly pissed because, wow, what a gap in history to not even glancingly mention it. But, that's Texas education for you. And my experience is not unique. There's a lot of people who were not taught about it. Um, but still, like, I
Every
get that
state,
it's not a
though,
proud time in our history, but it happened. So,
I had a different experience in education that, but it was like kind of like the reverse. So, like, really good example is learning about the Civil War. So, I grew up in New York in a very progressive school district. So, the way I learned the Civil War, definitely looking back on it, had a very pro North stance. Very, very pro North. And
yeah,
so,
my experience was
and
definitely opposite.
so like, so then I go to away to college, and this is why they call it higher ed because it challenges your pre-existing notions. Go to college, and I take a full blown course in the Civil War, and I learned the North almost lost. I didn't learn that in K-12. I learned the North won and we're awesome and we're self righteous and we're not raised. Like I was floored on how close we were to losing the war and why we almost lost the war and all of that. So that's why higher education isn't supposed to be 13th grade because you take the classes that teaches you stuff more in depth. Now, do teachers do this on purpose? Probably not. I'm sure it wasn't part of because how progressive the school was. They really taught us critical thinking and how to read between the lines of things. So I doubt it was it, but you're a product of where you live and the learning materials that you
Hmm.
select. And you only, even back then, you only have so much time to teach a subject. So
Hmm.
it's gonna, no matter what it is, you're always gonna have some small level of a bias spin only because you're being taught by a human being who has, we're all human beings and we all have opinions and we all, you know, sometimes, have biases. And
Well, but you make a really good point. The big part of education is teaching you to critically think. Like, it's one thing to learn this happened on this day and these were the people involved. It's another to have a conversation about, well, how did this lead to this and how was this influenced by this? Like, that's what we're really supposed to be learning is how to pick apart all those threads and make connections and question, was someone's motives as clear cut as it may sound, and so that we can critically think in our real life about how things transpire and why they happen. And that's being removed by not being able to have that conversation.
yeah, yeah, Cynthia mentions about being surrounded by Holocaust survivors. I was surrounded by the children and grandchildren of survivors. So from a real young age. I really think they started us in elementary school, honest. Definitely in middle. Definitely in middle. We had a Holocaust Remembrance Week, and we heard stories from direct from the mouths of survivors.
Did you see they
And
briefly removed that from the Pentagon pages, the remembrances of Holocaust survivors? They threw a fit and they
that's
put it back
dark.
up, but yeah.
But see, it works. You throw a fit and that's what we gotta keep, it's exhausting. I know. I'm exhausted. I'm so tired. And the battle hasn't even begun, in all reality. But like, we have to keep pressure on the people that can make big changes quicker. Otherwise, it's going to be a long fight for the little guys like us. Um,
Well, and
That's just
whitewashing history
straight
and
up.
dumbing it down to this patriotic, nationalistic vision of the past, it's not going to do us any good. It's not going to move us forward. It's not. I mean,
I
it's
wasn't
not.
damaged.
And I'll
I mean,
give.
I was hearing these pretty horrific Holocaust survivor stories from a very young age. I'm
Yeah,
okay. You know, like, and it's not
it
like they
made you
were,
more empathetic.
yeah, that's the enemy of the state is empathy. But like, you
Right.
know, also like looking back on, you know, you know, from my perspective as like, you know, a 9-year old, 10-year old would look like somebody's, you know, an older person. They weren't telling us every gory, horrific. I mean, we got the picture of how awful it was without them, like, you know, giving us nightmares. You know, I don't remember having nightmares afterwards. I know I didn't feel good afterwards because it's not something you should feel good after. Like, just because it bums out your kid and makes them feel sad because it's a sad topic doesn't mean they shouldn't hear it. Because I hate to break it to parents around the world, your kids get a that is the least of what they're going to experience. You're
Well, you
worried
just
about them
made a
hearing
really
about.
great point, though. If you study history and all you feel is proud, you didn't learn history. You learned mythology.
Yeah, that's a really good. That's a meme.
Hmm.
Somebody make that because you know, and you know, I learned about
I
the.
don't see the problem in admitting that people are human and they are flawed, and we all are, and they are guided by principles that we may find abhorrent and beliefs that we might think are out of touch, but they did what they did. It is what it is. We can't change that, but acting like it didn't happen is not going to move us forward. It's just
No,
not.
and
It's going to
like
set us back because now we're not going to recognize the signs when it's happening again. And it's
I
already
think that's the
happening. I
point.
don't know if you and I talked about this. Tennessee legislature is trying to pass a bill to make it where they no longer have to provide free public education to undocumented children. I didn't know this, but it wasn't until 1982 that federally it was mandated through a Supreme Court case that all public schools have to permit undocumented children to get an education. 1982. And already
Huh?
Tennessee is challenging that.
They didn't have a problem
Like
with it before. You
the
know,
whole
like
point. Well, like the whole point, like you're talking about how they just need to come to the if they're going to come here, they need to learn the language and they need to become an American. Well, then they need to be in the public school learning the language and learning the history and all that stuff. But they can't do that if you're not going to willingly let them into the school to get that education. So make up my mind, which is it?
yeah, and you know, like what's so funny about like going. This just popped into my head about like critical thinking. Like I don't know why this particular assignment was in my head. Just popped in my head. I remember having this assignment about the Magna Carta, and we had to read. We had to work in a group, and we had to answer questions as a group about the Magna Carta. I don't remember what the questions were. None of that stood out to me. But it wasn't what does it say? What was it? You know, it was asking you, okay, the Magna Carta says this, so what does that mean? You know, what would be some effects with having this phrase in the Magna Carta? And you know, and dates never mattered in like time period mattered, but not dates. Like you didn't have to know exactly when the Civil War started. You had to know it started around 1860, technically right after Lincoln is inaugurated. Um, I think, or right after he's elected. Rather, South Carolina secedes right after he's elected. You had to know that general time frame, but you never had to know exact dates. You didn't have to know what like you just had to have like within a 5 year because that's not what's important, you know.
Yeah, the point's the threads that tie it all together, not the exact names and dates and so forth. That's all. When I was in college, I had this professor, and he was everybody warned me not to take his classes. They said he's a hard ass, he's difficult, whatever. So, of course, me being me, I immediately signed up for one of his classes to find out. And his classes were fascinating. He was a history and poli sci professor. He was fascinating. And every single essay, like essay test or whatever, he would always be like, "You're right, but who was that? What year was that?" And I'm like, "I don't give a fuck. It doesn't matter. I know that it was the King of England. It was at this time, and it was because of this. I can look up his
Mhm.
name. That's not important. The point is that I understood, and I thought that's what you were teaching me, what led to it and what it means now, and so forth." Like, I would have loved to have gone to your school where the emphasis wasn't on, because in Texas, it was very much a rote memorization of names and dates, but no context.
Yeah, and I'd love to see the school now because for its time, like, and I don't, they never advertised, like, it was a very, people wanted to buy houses in that district because even to this day, very, it's known as very, very good. It's always in the top 100 best districts. Um, but it's not like they advertise, hey, we're a progressive school district. Just looking back on it with my life experience, I see how progressive they really were in what they were doing. And just like the population of the school, like now you can start if you're starting in kindergarten, you can have your kid go through a Spanish only track where your kid will be only taught in Spanish. So, and the point isn't for like immigrants. The whole point is so your kid's fluent in another language by the time they graduate. We're talking high school. Like it goes all the way to high school. So, like, just and so things like that now, like rewind when I was going to, so, they were just before their time. Like I was learning shit that's now all of a sudden controversial, but we were learning it. And like what's even wilder is I have a lot of classmates that are like MAGA. I know we learned the same shit. We learned, and somehow like it's like, dude, you are the DEI. Like, if
Mm-hmm.
you hate, like, what is wrong with you?
Mm-hmm. No, it's so funny. Several points that were being made in the chat was that the point of school is to learn to critically think, not what to think, but how to think. That's one credit I have to give to our government teacher, government civics teacher, and our history teacher when I was in high school. It was a very small high school, so yes, it was all one person, but um, they were very big on, okay, this is what the book says, now let's talk about it. And they would let people speak up and say, well, I don't understand this, what about this? Sometimes pretty controversial ideas. And they would let us sit with it until someone was willing to either speak up or let it slide. And it led to some interesting conversations that didn't necessarily have to get heated because it gave us a permission structure to be like, you know,
Yeah.
okay, but what about this? And I hear you say that, but I think it leaves out this. And it gave us a chance to have a more nuanced conversation about it and to actually back up. Like, because you couldn't just be like, well, I believe this. Okay, fine. But you can believe that all you want, but where are your facts? Where's your logic? Where's and that was helpful.
Yeah. Yeah. We had some really uncomfortable topics that we talked about, but like, yeah, we could have the conversation without getting upset with one another. I remember having a debate about um, in sixth grade about Israel and the Israel Palestinian side because they've been fighting each other for thousands of years. So, and there was, it did get heated. I don't know why I remember this. I can't remember yesterday, but I remember. And and the question was, who does the land belong to? And the whole point is, there's not supposed to be an answer
Yeah.
because, like, it's complicated and nuanced.
Yeah. If the
And
answer was simple, we'd have already solved this.
right, um, so and maybe if we had had more of those conversations, we would, maybe as a country have a little bit more understanding of what's going on over
Well, and I think that's why it's so important what you do professionally when you do your misinformation, disinformation, and all that. And something I feel that me on a public library standpoint, it's so important for us to do is that information literacy piece of yes, you saw it on the internet, but you do understand that I can put on the internet that the sky does not exist And there's nothing to stop me from saying that. Well, Twitter might have things to say about that, but I can say that, but that doesn't make it true. And but this is how you find out. This is how you discover why I might have said that and who may be encouraging me to say that and how I profit from saying that, but also how you can go and find what the truth is. And that's so important, and we've lost that. Like, that's such a critical skill we need to be teaching from the very earliest ages. Is not, here's the answer. No, what we need to be teaching them is, this is how you find the answer, and this is how you verify that answer. Like, I talk about my mom a lot like she was a god, and she absolutely was not. She was an imperfect human being, and I struggle to recognize that, but it's true. But she was so good about, right? Like, when you're a toddler and you're like, why? And she would never be like, she would rarely say, this is the answer and that's it. Often her response would be like, I don't know, let's go find out. And that encouraged me to be curious, but it also put the responsibility in my hands to figure out the answer and to check for myself if I trusted the answer. And that was powerful for me.
Yeah, I promise you all, they're trying to dumb our kids down, move ways of finding information, and you know, dumber
Look at the
population is
trees.
easier to
That is so
control.
right. Like, I respect someone who will say, I don't know, or I think the answer might be, but let's check. Like, there's so much, like, I hate a boss who's like, no, this is the answer. Okay, but why? Like, please, if you can give me logical reasons, I will do it your way. But if the reason is just, this is the way we've always done it, you can F right off, because that's not a good answer. You know? There's so much power
Yeah,
in, I don't know enough to have an opinion on this. Like, that's something we need in the society so hard. I do not know enough about this topic to have an opinion on it. For example, the Israel Gaza Strip situation. I am not informed enough on the history and all of the nuance involved to have an opinion on this. I recognize that. So I will not voice my opinion on it, because I know that I don't know the answer. And it's either,
and
if I want to voice an opinion, I need to go find facts to back that up.
I forgot what, like, I think it was just part of world hit, because at that point we were learning world history. I don't think anything had happened at that point. What and like the teacher gave us like information to read and look through. Class had to talk about it. So
That
like
permission
you know
structure is
at
so important. That's something I respected about my parents, is that I think we've talked about this on here before. My mom and my dad had there was about 10 years between them, but they had very different perspectives on the Vietnam War. My mother had been a hippie protesting against it. My dad had volunteered and participated in the war. And then when we were growing up, of course, it was later, their political ideologies were very different. But neither of them was like, no, this is how you have to think. Like, me and my siblings were encouraged to say, okay, well, I hear what you're saying, but what about this? Or, like, we could counter them. We couldn't be rude. We couldn't call them stupid, nothing like that. But we could ask, help me understand your perspective. And, well, what about this perspective? And that was huge. And I don't think we do enough of that.
So I know we're like a little past the top of the hour, but I think for when it comes to education now, it's on you. Like it's on us. So if you have a kid or I know you and Derek watch your grandkid often. It's on us to educate them like about things they're not going to be educated about. And they're
Oh,
like,
trust,
I
we're
know my
raising a
daughter's
nerd.
good. Yeah, like my daughter's a nerd, but she doesn't know what nerd means. So,
Hmm.
know, like,
We told our granddaughter that nerds are people who get things done.
yeah, so like, I, yeah, it's gonna take decades to recover from this.
Yeah.
It
Um,
really, and it's
did you
hard
want
for
to
me.
talk about the title?
Oh, that's right, I forgot, and I didn't have time to set it up yet. So
That's fine.
let me I have the podcast. So we need a new podcasting because it's not really the ladies room anymore. We talk more about, I guess, more library education related type topics, but all related to politics and And we're looking for a new name for the show, and so we're gonna have the audience vote. Now I don't have the actual. We're gonna put one of those polls on YouTube, but some of our top favorites are The Fine Print, Due for Debate, Noise in the Stacks. Um, where was the? There was one.
There was one that was like overdue conversations or something like that.
Overdue Conversations. Um, uh, there was one that was like Chronicle of Disinformation. Anyway, I'll get them all on. Those were just a few that I have highlighted on the list that we have. So vote on them, and we'll see which one's the most popular for a new show title. Because we gotta kind of just go with the. We didn't really know what starting this. We didn't know what it would turn into, so um, we're just kind of going with the direction of where it's going. Yeah, that's true, Derek. Everything that we really enjoy was made by a nerd. Chances are, so.
Oh, plug
Well,
your socials.
I'm bad at that. Okay, so um, let me get. I was doing before this. I was doing a lot of things, trying to do more than one thing at a time. So naturally, so we got the link tree, Library of Democracy, where you'll find links to the show and stuff. I'm getting it for the link. So you'll find the Substack there. You can buy me and Leah a coffee there to support the show. Um, we also have the Substack links are on there to check out our um, the publication from the Library of Democracy and the Kaufman Chronicle. And as always, watch Tony's show, the Tony Michaels podcast, every Monday through Friday at 12 p.m. Eastern. Um, you'll get a little harsher version of things that we say. So,
He's a little more colorful, but we translate that into slightly
yeah,
better language
that's
for
really our
folks.
goal is to translate for the more academic types, or you can't catch his content right away. We have more academic spin. Not necessarily about academics, just academically more minded, I guess you could say. So, am I
Yeah, we like
forgetting anything
statistics
else?
better than he does.
Yeah, and you know what? Sometimes you need a chart. Sometimes like I could either read off stats or you could just see a pretty little chart. Sometimes people always need a visual, and sometimes that's in a chart. However, charts and data get way misused and overused, and it'll just So I do agree with him on that. But if you
Absolutely.
want to prove a point, a lot of times a chart is necessary. I'll die on
And we
that.
appreciate Tony for letting us use StreamYard.
And thank you for letting us use StreamYard. I think that's it. Am I forgetting anything?
I don't think so, but we should totally make merch, man.
We should. And you know what? That's why you gotta subscribe. You guys gotta subscribe and get this channel bigger so we can actually link our store there, and then send us some ideas for merch that you want. I can come up with some stuff, but
We should
stuff
make
that you're like,
bookmarks because we're nerds.
that would be. Why didn't we think of that sooner? Let's get the name of the new show, and then we'll have bookmarks. That's
There
a
you
good
go.
idea.
No,
And
those are
those are
Twitter strips. Who needs bookmarks?
right. Oh gosh. Well, thank you all for joining in. Like, share, subscribe. Go to our Substacks and social media, and we'll see y'all next week. Bye, friends.
Bye.